let's talk about the first YA novel that I've read in a while. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is the To Those We Found by George Ander book review. Before we do jump into that review, make sure you're checking the description box down below for links to my Discord and social media, should you want to come along for the ride. To Those We Found is George Ander's debut novel. It is a YA first contact novel within the sci-fi sphere, and it takes place on a galaxy and a planet that is nothing like we have here on Earth, and it does give that feeling of being completely separated from our own planet, which is really cool and what you sort of want in that space opera sci-fi vibe. This one has a lot of heart. It does go through a fair amount of philosophical questioning where we talk about what's right versus what's wrong, or what's good versus what's evil, and it does offer a fair amount of personal exploration of the characters, and you can really see their passion coming from the author within this exploration, which we'll get into a little bit later. We follow main protagonist Taman Yetta. He is a young man who has just won the lottery in this particular story. The lottery gives Yetta an opportunity to travel many a light year away to compete in the esteemed Artemis report and become the champion that the galaxy needs. But to compete, he must leave everyone that he knows and loves, family, friends, anything he's ever known behind, because the travel time will see him basically take over their lifetimes, and by the time that he gets there, it is likely they will have all passed away, unfortunately. But the prize is too great to resist. He wants to become the best leader that the galaxy has ever seen, or the world has ever seen, and he just hopes that by going he can make his family proud. After his travel, he wakes up on a new planet in a dingy laboratory, which doesn't really seem like what he signed up for, and at this point it's been decades and decades of interstellar travel and his family have passed away, so he's feeling a bit about that, and then to wake up in a dingy laboratory is something that he was not expecting. Something here feels very, very wrong. One, he's late and he only has 3 weeks to complete the Artemis report, something which the other contestants have had months to do, and there seems to be terrorists everywhere and he needs to break free. Desperate to reach the well-loved and very kind leader, Gwafa Imzen Razan, I had to look at that one, he aims to use his time wisely and put together the pieces of this new society to complete the Artemis report in time to win. As Taman travels from location to location, he gathers data and discovers that all may not be as it seemed. Maybe those people who are screaming for help in front of factory gates aren't the bad guys after all, and they're not the ones that we should be punishing. Fundamentally, this is a story of trying to choose the right side, of gathering enough information from both sides of the coin, one of privilege and one of disadvantage, in order to make the right decision for a majority of the population. The two things that I really took away from this young adult novel and the teachings that come forth through it is an ability to show compassion, or learning to show compassion, and also accepting yourself for who you really are. It are the two biggest messages that came through on the page for me personally. That's essentially the story. Jumping into what I thought. To Those We Found had so many important themes, and I wish I'd read something like this when I was a lot younger. The author explores a number of different things. We have religion and the importance of faith. On the other side of that, how faith can be used as a weapon for people and a fear-mongering tactic. We had questioning of sexuality and learning to accept that sexuality. We had a lot of political manipulation within these pages in a way that was approachable for a younger audience to come and start to understand how some of those things might be prevalent in their own lives in the outside world. I do have a few criticism of the writing style and structure, however, which did sort of bring this down a little bit for me personally. There were a couple of times where I was quite jarred reading this book in terms of the pacing and events, that they may have been important to look at, but they took a while to be explained, or when they should have been explained more, they're a little bit glossed over in my opinion, and it felt like we needed more explaining. Some of those things I think that you would learn as a writer as you go on. There was also a case, again in my opinion, that there were too many themes being discussed for a book that only clocked about 400 pages, I think it was. It's been a while since I've read it. And we did have a lot of those themes that I mentioned earlier, but the author tried to explain all of them, and it got a little bit convoluted at times, whereas if we pulled back and we explored one or two in more depth, the book would have had a lot more flow to it. Because there were a lot of themes, they built on top of one another, and it meant that some of the themes that we started with were put aside and then would jolt back into the story at some point, and it didn't really allow for a smooth flow. By pulling back on those themes, I believe we would have had a stronger entry and a smoother reading experience. There was one of these themes which shone through the page beautifully, and that was the acceptance of sexuality. George Ander is part of the LGBTQIA+ community himself, and it did show that passion and that acceptance, and maybe some of those things that young LGBTQIA+ people go through which aren't so nice, to gain acceptance from other people. It was very prevalent in this story, and again, like I said before, it is something that I wish that I had read a lot younger when I was questioning my own sexuality. I think a lot of those themes are important, and this will help some kids go through their own journey, which is such an important thing to be able to find in literature, particularly in fiction, where you get to relate to these characters on another level. The author has really put their heart and soul into this particular story point, and it shows. And it's innocent, and it blossoms beautifully throughout the page. It's not super heavy, even though it's a heavy topic. It is very approachable for people within that community, but also people who want to learn about others within that community. And I think this is a book that could really help young people to explore themselves, but also question others, just in case they wanted to, but remembering to be respectful if you're going to ask those questions of people. At the end of the day, I did have a good time with Ander's book, even though I had a few issues with the writing style and the structure. I'm very interested to see where George Ander goes next, whether there's a continuation to this series or whether he does other sci-fi works in the future. I'm interested to see how his writing progresses. That was it. That was a really quick review of To Those We Found by George Ander. What did you think? Do you think you'll pick this one up? Let me know in those comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.